Okay, I'm ready. All right, welcome everyone. Really excited to have you here. My name is Kirsten Nilsson. I am the Youth Services Roundtable Chair for this year. I apologize for it. We had a tiny little tech issue, but we're all set now. And I wanted to make a couple of announcements, and then I will introduce our guest keynote speaker for today. So first of all, I really want to give a big, huge thank you to all of the people who have helped with this workshop today, especially Patrick Hutchins from the Salt Lake City Public Library, who has been the tech guru and made everything happen. And we're really, really grateful for that. I want to thank Rachel Spahn, who helped me with our journaling kits, which those of you who registered early received those, and they were great. And all the members of the Youth Services Roundtable Committee. And Rita, who designed our really cute t-shirts. Mine's too low for you to see, but they're really fun. We love them. You can order them from the ULA website if you'd like one. Couple of announcements. Remember to vote for your ULA officers. You should have received that email. And if you didn't get the email, you may not have renewed your ULA membership. And we would also love to invite anyone who would like to serve with us on this Youth Services Roundtable Committee. We've planned this conference. We work on things throughout the year. And it's a really, really fun place to get to know people from, or librarians from all over the state. So please join, email me if you're interested in that. All right, so let's get started. I really am excited to introduce to you Rita Christensen. She is our ULA president. She probably looks quite familiar to most of you. And she has been working in library. She has 20 years of library experience in academic and public libraries. She currently works as the children's librarian at the Orem Public Library. And she has all kinds of experience in all aspects of library leadership. And we're so grateful that she's our ULA president this year. She currently writes book reviews for School Library Journal also. And in my mind, she appears to have endless energy and enthusiasm. And I've really appreciated her helping us with this. So I'm going to turn the time over to Rita.
Thank you, Kirsten. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, thumbs up. Can you see my screen? Okay, thanks. Well, those were very kind words, Kirsten. Thanks so much. And thank you to the Youth Services Roundtable leaders for all the hard work that you have put into creating meaningful conversations and training during the ULA 2021-2022 year. Thank you to all our roundtable members and youth services librarians for showing up to our events, listening, taking notes, pondering, trying out and implementing new ideas into the services and programs you provide the children and youth of Utah. I appreciate every single librarian in Utah for providing excellent service throughout all of the organizational and personal challenges that we have been experiencing. It's been 2 years of closing and opening services and adapting programs to online and hybrid events. We have learned new ways to connect to our community and each other. And I'm so excited to finally meet in person in May. And the conference registration link and portal will open very soon, so stay tuned. Please note, I am wearing our YSRT United in Diversity t-shirt to support this roundtable. And don't forget that we have 4 more days to celebrate Library Lovers Month which was formally recognized by the Utah State Senate on Tuesday. A round of applause for ULA and our legislators. ULA has written a new land acknowledgement for the association and for the upcoming conference with guidance from our state tribal governments. The Utah Library Association represents libraries located on Native American shared territory of the Confederated Tribes of Goshute, Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, San Juan Southern Paiute Tribe, Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation, Skull Valley Band of Goshute, Ute Indian Tribe of the Uinta and Ouray Reservation, Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, White Mesa Community, and the Navajo Nation. We honor the original ancestors of this land and also offer respect to their sovereign nations. We acknowledge this history to cultivate respect for and advocate with our indigenous communities still stewarding this land. I feel honored and humbled to speak to you today. You are the experts in the field of youth services. Most of you are already invested in the good and hard work of promoting diversity through programs, services, and outreach. And I know that many of you know more about representation and diversity in youth services than I do. I look up to many of you and value your opinions, thoughts, and advice. After being elected the ULA president-elect in 2020, I needed to come up with a theme for my presidency year. Because of my background, I thought diversity could be an avenue to take. I wrote down every past ULA conference theme that I could find, and I placed them into 7 categories. Communities, future, vision, connection, information, advocacy, learning, and leadership. All the themes in these categories were inspired and amazing. And diversity definitely can be incorporated into each and every one of the categories and themes. But there was no one theme that focused solely on diversity in librarianship. So this presented an opportunity to focus on this important issue during my presidential year. Becca Lale, Allison Maurer, and I came up with hundreds of possible themes. Being a children's librarian, I could not get past the idea that Blaze a Trail would be the perfect theme. Think of the programming possibilities. And this is real. I really actually love the idea and all the options that I would have with that theme. But Becca and Allison eventually brought me back to my senses. No, we could not have a Berenstain Bears conference theme. So we finally picked a United in Diversity, Unida en la Diversidad theme. And although diversity, equity, and inclusion has certainly been an oft visited topic for librarians and researchers in the past, little did pandemic, social unrest, and book banning would turn our world upside down, and that representation would be the rotating pivot point of our conversations, actions, and inactions on a national and global scale. Representation matters, and particularly in youth services in our libraries, and in a state that is the fastest growing state in the nation, and in a country where children of color are the majority of children in America. Our theme, United in Diversity, Unida en la Diversidad, has deep personal meaning to me. I have a story to tell you. The Philippines has an ancient history. However, it was under colonial rule for 425 years. 48 of these were under American imperialism until 1946. The sugar industry in Hawaii needed thousands of men to work the pineapple plantations. Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese laborers were recruited, but there were labor problems. So the plantation owners looked to two territories of the United States at that time, Puerto Rico and the Philippines. The Philippines had a large rural population to tap into for manual labor. Large-scale Filipino immigration occurred during this time from 1906 to 1934. Recruitment was on a temporary immigration 3-year contract. The Cabrianas came from an economically depressed area of Cebu in the central Visayas region. My great-grandpa, Calixto Cabriana, immigrated with his wife, Rita, and their young son, Ideneo, and 6 other relatives. They were sent to Oahu, arriving in 1922. They worked as sugar cane cutters for 77 cents to $1 a day. Now remember that it was back-breaking work, no overtime for weekends and holidays, horrible living conditions, and immigrants suffered extreme prejudice and racism. However, their prime goal in Hawaii was to save money and return quickly as possible to their homeland. The Cabrianas, nearing the end of their contract, elected not to return to the Philippines, but rather went to California to find better jobs. In 1925, they were given ship fare, and when they arrived in California, they were hired on a dock by a Filipino labor contractor to work in the sugar beet fields around Guadalupe and Santa Maria valleys. Ideneo met Maria in California. They were married in 1929 and settled in Lompoc, where my great-grandfather worked as a tractor driver for Guadalupe Produce. 6 of their 7 children were born in the Guadalupe Produce labor camp of Lompoc. This is a family picture of my great-grandfather in the center at the christening party of my grandmother, Adeline. And this is a picture of my great-grandmother, Mary, sitting with family friends at the bottom right. She's second from the right. She's right here. And this baby right there is my grandmother, Adeline. My grandmother and her 6 siblings began their schooling at Artesia School, a 1-room schoolhouse, which is now a museum, with 1 teacher teaching 1st to 6th grade. It was there that they learned their English, having spoken the dialect of their immigrant parents. By the time my grandmother was 10, her parents were divorced and the children lived with their father. Adeline was abused by a farmhand, and my grandmother gave birth to my father at 14 years old, with her siblings delivering the baby. Now, you must admit, this is the most adorable child you've ever seen. This is Wayne, my father. All of the siblings took care of Wayne while Adeline was in school. She graduated from high school and was accepted to Berkeley University. Without financial or community support, she could not attend college. On the other side of the pond, German immigrants by the name of Heller and Schrock came to the United States via the UK in the 1700s. The Hellers settled Hellerstown in Pennsylvania. These are my great-great-grandparents, Peter and Rebecca. In this picture at the top right is their daughter, Selfa, my great-grandmother. They migrated to the Midwest and then Alberta, Canada, and finally to Yakima Valley in Washington, and had 8 children along the way. Dorothea Lange, the famous American documentary photojournalist, included my great-grandparents' family, the Schrocks, in a photo essay about the situation in Yakima Valley in 1939. They also migrated throughout the Midwest up to Alberta, Canada, and then moved to Yakima. Many families were still living in tents after the Depression in Yakima, but Lange's photographs of the Schrock family in the Yakima Valley put emphasis on success through the government's Farm Service Agency programs. Dorothea wrote in August 1939, Washington, Yakima Valley near Wapato. One tenant purchase program client, Jacob N. Schrock. The family with 8 children had lived for 25 years on a rocky rented farm in this valley. They now own 48 acres of good land, this good house priced at $6,770. They raise hay, grain, dairy, and hogs. Mrs. Schrock says, quite a lot of difference between that old rock pile and around here. This is my great-grandmother Schrock baking bread. It doesn't look like luxury to us, but considering the circumstances, it was a step up from how they had been living. And here is the kitchen and my great aunt. In this slide on the left are the 5 Schrock siblings in the Dorothea Lange picture, and this was taken in 1980. And on the right are 4 generations of the Cabrianas. On the left, you see Mary, that was in the christening picture, and then Adeline, that was the baby. Bernadette is in white, that's my aunt, and then I'm in the red on the right. On the left is my mom, my great-grandma Schrock, and me. On the right is my grandma Adeline and me. You can see that there are 2 different worldviews that I, as a young child and teen, had to navigate. And this is why I've been keenly aware of diversity, equality, and inclusion matters since I was a child. I was living both majority and minority experiences. Considering my background, what books did I see myself in as a youth? My father died when I was 2 due to the Vietnam War, and my mother and stepfather moved up to Packwood, Washington. That's in the Cascade Mountains. It was remote, but my step-grandparents lived there, and after we moved to Vancouver, I swapped summers staying with them in Packwood and my Filipino family in the Bay Area. The bookmobile stopped on my street in Vancouver, and I remember searching for my favorite books vividly. In California, I used Grandma Addie's card to check out books at the Marin County Free Library Civic Center branch. And I was pretty lucky to be checking out books in a library designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Back in Vancouver, I checked out 2 poetry books from the Fort Vancouver Library, Poetry for Pleasure and Zero Makes Me Hungry. I particularly love Zero Makes Me Hungry, and you can see that the description says, it is a collection of modern poems for young people to explore a wide range of subjects and encompass diverse ethnic and cultural traditions. And I love the poem Numbers, written by Leaky Barnstone. I hate and like math. The letter O and the number 0 sound like poems about, oh, snowflake. 0 makes me hungry. It is the emptiest number in the universe, which is and is not round. The wonder of 0, oh, snowflake, and the universe will never be solved. I want my lunch. I thought it was the deepest poem I had ever read. And it was written by a 12-year-old who is now Missouri's poet laureate. The 2 poetry books got wet, as is common in the Northwest, then moldy, which is also common in the Northwest. We got overdue fines, then replacement fines, and we never went back to the library. And here are the books, I kept them. So 0 Makes Me Hungry. And look at this, when I open it up, there's probably a copy of the card catalog in the book. And here's Poetry for Pleasure, totally falling apart, mold and all, I still have it. So that's my plug for libraries going fine free. As a young girl, libraries gave me something to do, and they developed me into a reader. I was reading books like Caddy Woodlawn, published in 1973. I related to this book a lot. Caddy was running around the Wisconsin frontier, and I was running around in rural parts of Washington and Oregon. I also love the Little House on the Prairie and Little House books, published in the 30s. I read the books and I watched every TV show from 1974 to 1982. And I loved Anne of Green Gables, published in 1908, a story about Spunky Anne Shirley and her adventures on a farm on Prince Edward Island. And I really love Pippi Longstocking, first published in 1950. I loved that Pippi was unconventional and unpredictable. You can see there is a theme here: female protagonists, red hair, and strong personalities. And I love those books. When I went to Packwood in the summers, after playing cards and riding a bike and swimming in the creek, all you could do was read and read and read. My grandmother got me hooked on her used Harlequin romance novels in the 80s, and that opened my eyes to a whole new world. But what books would have given me and other children and teens knowledge about my Filipino family and experiences? In the 70s and 80s, there weren't any books presented to me beyond myths, legends, folktales, holiday, and geography books about the Philippines. Really, there were none. White was the default. If you flip the paradigm, think about what it would be like for you to never see or read any characters about someone like you presented in any of the books you read. And for us to ever read books about children or teens like you, or to read about the second largest Asian group in America. A broom is sturdy because its strands are tightly bound. This Filipino proverb means people gain strength by standing together. In this roundtable, being united in diversity means that all youth librarians in Utah hold fast to the value that representation matters, that children should be able to read and see themselves in stories to help them shape a positive identity, and to provide youth with new experiences and opportunities to learn about different cultures and people, which creates empathy, cultural understanding, and connection to others in our community and the world. Rudine Sims Bishop warns us that when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are a part. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie has advised that the single story creates stereotypes. And the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story. It is hard to wake up someone who is pretending to be asleep. This proverb means that while it's easy to tell people something they do not know, it is much harder if they are willfully choosing not to see what is before them. Our Year of Learning June training and meetup addressed issues with the topic of publishers of color. We also talked generally about inclusive collections that reflect diversity in our local community, but also our national and global community. There are more diversity titles being published and being put on library shelves than when I was a child. We see the reviews, we buy them, we put them on our shelves and create displays and programs around them. Diverse titles are winning awards. The first book that I read that reflected the dynamics of my Filipino family was Newbery Award winner Hello Universe, written by Erin Entrada Kelly, and I was 51 years old. But our training in June indicated that the fact is the publishing industry is playing possum. They are not choosing to see what is before them. They need to wake up and do better. The 2020 Cooperative Children's Book Center stats look like this. And this is for books written for children and teens. So you can see that 41% of the books that were published, and this is from a sampling of the books that they received from the publishers, 41% are white, 29% are animals, 12% of the titles published were Black, 9% of the titles were Asian, 6% Latin, and 3% represented disability. Now, I have to look very closely, this little notation at the bottom right. 0.001 represent Pacific Islanders, 0.008 presented Arab characters, and 0.15 presented Indigenous characters to children. Now, I ran the 2021 numbers off of their website, and most of the numbers for the categories went up by 1%. With the Pacific Islander percentage remaining the same, the Arab category does go down to 0.006, and the Indigenous category goes up to 2%. So based on my calculations, only 32% of books published last year were about Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And in the last US Census, 50% of American children are classified as non-white. Overall, racial diversity in kids' books is going up when you look at the stats over the last 25 years. But progress is seen as being slow, and the stats show that it is not equitable. And many of you, I am sure, have seen this graphic. Lee and Low is the largest multicultural children's book publisher in the United States. And they conducted a survey in 2015, gathering gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability information on publishing staff, literary agents, and reviewers to gauge inclusivity of staffers and of those who are making decisions about books that are being published in America. Then they did a second survey in 2019, and they had a bigger pool to survey. They included 153 companies, the big 5 publishers, 8 review journals, 47 trade publishers, 35 university presses, and 63 literary agencies across the US. The new survey results showed little change from the initial survey deployed in 2015. And it's striking when you look at the percentages, how little minority, LGBTQ, and people with a disability are represented in the publishing industry. So as we look at the chart, you can see that race, gender, orientation, and disability are very high for the white race, cis women, individuals that are straight, and the non-disabled. And it's so striking that, so if you look at race, 76 are white or Caucasian, and then when you go down to a minority category, it's 7% Asian, and then the numbers just drop from there. And with gender, 74 are cis women, and then 23% cis man, and then, okay, we just dropped way down to 1% gender fluid. Orientation, 81 straight, then it drops to 10% bisexual, 4% gay, and it gets lower from there. And then of course we have 11% that are disabled. So obviously we can see a connection between representation in the publishing industry and representation in youth titles. A sleeping shrimp is carried away by the current. This proverb means you snooze, you lose. If you aren't paying attention, you won't have any control over the outcome. Our Year of Learning October training and meetup topic was auditing your collection. 3 librarians audited a small portion of their collections to get a snapshot of diversity representation in their assignments. And I was one of those 3 librarians. For the meetup, I decided to evaluate all picture books used in the Orem Library Storytime programs for our winter, spring, and summer blocks. I wanted to see if we as a children's department were paying attention to diversity in our story times and in our books, and controlling the messages that we were giving our children and caregivers. So in my diversity audit, I evaluated 55 books. Most of those, all of them were picture books. A diversity audit is a count of titles to help you determine what percentage of your collection is made up of non-dominant voices. It's important to make sure that your material reflects the diversity, not only in your community, but in the country. And it helps to avoid stereotypes and build diverse, inclusive collections. And I based my audit on the audit that was presented in the training that we had in June. And that is Kimberly Powell's YouTube training. She is a children's and YA consultant at the Connecticut State Library. So I evaluated the authors that wrote the picture books that we used. And sometimes I had to guess the author's identity. And that took a lot of time. And I felt like I was digging a lot, and probably I was digging too much to try to figure it out. So I don't suggest that, but what I came up with is that 65% of the books that we read were female, 35% of the books were male. White sister, okay. Well, we've got the white cisgender neurotypical female and male. I just evaluated those if I could figure it out within the female and male category. But as far as diverse authors go, only 9% were represented in our books that we read, and only 4% were LGBTQIA. Then I evaluated the main characters that were presented in the Storytime books. Okay, so 55% were animals, 42% were white, 27% were non-human, like crayons or machines or crayons, 11% Latinx, 9% Black, 7% were biracial or unspecified persons of color, 5% were Asian, 5% joyful own voices, 5% were set outside the US, 4% colors, 4% Native American and Indigenous, 4% Middle Eastern and immigrants. And then there weren't any stories that were told that included characters that were differently abled or neurodiverse. Then I also looked at the genre. So fantasy, for me in the picture books, this was just my own category. Any stories with talking animals not included in tales. So 44% of the books that we read were fantasy books, 38% were contemporary or realistic, 15% fell into the folk and fairy tales category, and 4% in the historical fiction category. If you plant, you harvest. This proverb means that your future will be the result of your actions today, so plan ahead. The audit took 8 hours to evaluate 56 books. I have 90,000 books in my collection, so I don't see myself ever doing the whole collection in a year, but just a small sampling gave me very useful data. My findings indicate that diversity representation in the books that were read in our Storytime programs could improve. Although we talk about diversity a lot, we didn't have a dedicated plan, and it showed. representation in our storytime books reflected closely to the diversity and publishing survey, which was disappointing. I shared my findings with my staff, and we created specific goals for our future storytime programs to share more stories that give our children mirrors and windows that reflect and affirm. We now schedule diversity reports that children's staff prepare on a rotating basis so that we have accurate facts, correct vocabulary, and signage that represent the national heritage months that we celebrate throughout the year in story times, programs, and displays. Our diversity and inclusion displays are more intentional and planned much farther out in advance so that we have time to plan a message that makes a lasting impact on children and families. Our Lunar New Year dragon that is up right now accompanies a Lunar New Year book display and a passive program, and it's over 50 feet long. It took a lot of planning, preparation, creativity, and troubleshooting to make this happen. My tellers always write up their lesson plans that include the songs and books that are used. The books are also recorded on a spreadsheet. Now we make sure that inclusive books are read throughout the month and highlighted on a spreadsheet. We also decided that our Little Learner Storytime podcast needed to include our largest minority group. And we premiered our first Spanish Storytime podcast this month. And Storytime and bilingual Storytime podcasts are scheduled into our annual rotation. These steps aren't a major shift in operations, but it is an example of an intentional effort to get our diversity percentages up to a higher level so that we represent everyone in our community. The pain of the little finger is felt by the whole body. This proverb means that the world is connected, and injustice or disservice to one person impacts more than just that person. A lack of representation in library books and programs is a disservice and affects individuals, families, and the whole community. Unfortunately, diverse stories, people, and themes make some people uncomfortable, and those books are the most challenged by community members. When I read the titles that are being challenged and banned, it hurts. It makes me wonder if my grandmother's story were turned into a young adult book and the whole story, would it be challenged or banned? I appreciate that there is a session today being presented on book challenges that are happening in Utah. In my 2021 conference speech, I told you about Ava, that on a cold February day, Ava, a 7-year-old African-American girl, came to my library. Ava froze when she saw a Black History Month poster and book display in the children's area. With a huge smile on her face, she told her mom how much she loved the library and that she had decided to be a librarian when she grows up. Then Ava whispered in her mother's ear, "When I see Black history posters and books in places, it really makes me feel like I belong there." And on Valentine's Day this year, the Orem Library received this Google review. "Love this library. It seems like they always have the books I am looking for, and the people there are always super friendly and helpful. I also love that they celebrate diverse communities throughout the year and encourage kids to read diverse books. Thank you, Orem Library. It appears that our efforts have been noticed, and that is a great feeling." Every pot has a matching lid. I'm sharing this final Filipino proverb as a metaphor for one of the 5 laws of library science. Every book has its reader. Don't shy away from purchasing, reading, featuring and using inclusive books in your library and programs because you don't feel qualified or are afraid of making a mistake. We need inclusive books in our libraries for our youth. Diverse books have a place in our libraries and they will find their readers. Representation matters. The ULA goal for my presidential year is during the 2021-2022 Year of Learning events, association members will learn, discuss, and take action on issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. At the end of the year, participating members will have the skills to create unifying EDI experiences and solutions for their patrons, communities, and libraries. Please continue to share your actions and solutions in future youth services meetups, activities, and workshops. I look forward to hearing about what you've learned and your many successes and amazing experiences. And as always, stay united in diversity, unida en la diversidad. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was really inspirational and gets me really excited. That this is something that's close to my heart as well. I hope that every library can get that kind of a review. That's just exciting. I mean, it's something you dream about, that they would notice exactly that. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. So I was excited to hear from Rita, and I forgot to make a bunch of other announcements. One of which is that there's closed captioning available through Zoom for each of our sessions. And at the end of each session, we will post the link for the next chat. And I'm going to do that right now. Let's see. Whoop. Okay, well, let me stop thinking about more than one thing at a time. Okay. There we go. So for the next two sessions, or the next session will be two different sessions, and you can choose whether you'd like to attend the one geared towards children's programming or for young adult. We'll have Developing Your Teen Base by our fantastic Salt Lake City public librarians, and then we have a Storytime Boosters, a booster for your story times. I was thinking about booster shots, but also booster rockets when we were planning that one. And Tammy Austin and her crew from the Salt Lake County Library will be presenting that one. So we will have a 5-minute break. Well, it'll be less than 5 minutes. We'll start at, no, it'll be 5 minutes. We'll start at 9:40. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. I'm going to share this final slide so you'll see what's coming up. That's not the right slide. I'll get the hang of this eventually. Okay. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you at the next session.